Okay, let's jump into this deep dive. We've got a bunch of sources here, straight from you, our listener, and they're all zoning in on, well, spot Ether ETFs. Pretty hot topic right now.
Absolutely. And this is, specifically tailored to the material you shared. We're going straight to the recent performance, the data, and what everyone's saying about it.
Right. So our mission today is basically to unpack what's behind this, frankly, quite impressive run of inflows we've seen recently for Ether ETFs. We'll look at how the sources compare that to, say, Bitcoin ETFs, check the price situation, and then explore what the commentators are thinking about Ether's future. Price predictions, maybe even changes to the ETFs themselves.
Yeah, the goal is to help you cut through the noise on this using just the info provided.
And honestly, just looking at these numbers initially, there's a story here about investor interest, isn't there?
Oh, definitely. What's really fascinating and what these sources highlight is how flows into something like an ETF can act as a signal. It's not just price movement. It shows where actual capital is going in a regulated way. These inflows, as the material suggests, they can indicate shifts in sentiment, maybe strategic moves by bigger players.
And the consistency the sources are pointing to, it's kind of striking. We're talking, what, a 15-day consecutive inflow streak for U.S. spot Ether ETFs?
Yeah, 15 days straight. That's quite a run according to the reports you sent. And specifically over that period, the material says these ETFs pulled in a net total of $837.5 million.
Wow. $837.5 million. Just flowing in over, what, about 3 trading weeks?
Pretty much.
That's a serious chunk of change. And the sources, they put this into context too, right? Saying this one streak makes up about a quarter of all the net inflows since these things launched back in July 2024.
Exactly. So while they've been around for a bit, this recent period, based on these figures, it really represents a concentrated burst of interest and investment. And there's even some chatter in the sources suggesting, if this keeps up for just a little longer, maybe into next week, this single run could actually push past the $1 billion mark in total inflows.
$1 billion from one streak.
Yeah.
Okay, that really underlines the intensity of this recent flow, like the sources say. And to get a better feel for the landscape, the material you provided also draws a comparison with spot Bitcoin ETFs.
Yes, that's a key point in the sources. They highlight that it hasn't been the same smooth sailing for Bitcoin ETFs lately. Their own big inflow streak apparently broke back on May 29th.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, marked by a pretty significant outflow day. $346.8 million went out that day. And since then, the material shows their flows have been, much more mixed up and down.
So you've got this contrast then. Bitcoin ETFs, according to these sources, have been kind of choppy, money in, money out, sometimes big swings.
Right.
While Ether ETFs, over the same recent time frame, have just seen this steady, strong drumbeat of money coming in. It's quite a difference in the short term based on this material.
It really is. And this is all happening while Ether's price itself has been looking pretty strong. The sources mention Ether trading around $2,490 when the material came out.
Right.
And that's after a big jump, 31.23% over the previous 30 days. So the inflows are happening alongside positive price action.
Yeah, that recent price pop definitely adds fuel to the fire, doesn't it? And the sources, they don't just look backward, they also dive into speculation about what this could mean for Ether's price, going forward.
Indeed. There are some notably bullish takes cited in the material you sent. One kind of interesting angle connects Ether's potential path to something called a multi-year gold fractal.
A gold fractal. Okay, explain that a bit. That's like a historical pattern analysts see in gold charts, and they think Ether might follow it.
Precisely. The idea presented is, basically, if Ether's chart pattern continues to resemble a specific pattern seen in gold's long-term history, it could imply a rally, potentially heading towards the $6,000 mark in the coming months. It's using history as a potential roadmap, so to speak.
Okay, interesting. Using historical analogies, and there was also mention of technical analysis pointing towards a new all-time high.
Yes, the sources reference TAs suggesting that Ether's current price action seems to be echoing patterns from earlier in this 2024-2025 cycle.
Uh-huh.
And the implication, according to the analysis cited, is that this might be setting the stage for Ether to actually break past its previous peak, sort of mirroring the climb it made to its all-time high back in the 2021 cycle.
And just to remind everyone, the sources note that Ether's all-time high is $4,878, right? Hit back in November 2021.
That's the number.
So these forecasts mention the gold fractal thing towards $6 and the technicals hinting at surpassing $4,878. They're definitely ambitious compared to that previous record.
They certainly are. And, beyond just price talk, the sources also touch on ways these Ether ETFs themselves might evolve, specifically how they could offer maybe better long-term performance.
How so?
Well, there's commentary suggesting that adding staking capabilities is pretty crucial if these ETFs want to be truly competitive down the line.
Ah, staking. So the ETF would actually hold the Ether and earn yield from helping run the network.
Exactly. That would be a big deal.
Fundamental change, yeah. And the sources said there's some actual movement happening there.
They did. They highlighted a report from late May suggesting that staking ETFs, for both Ethereum and Solana actually, could potentially launch in the U.S. within weeks.
Within weeks? Wow.
Yeah, and this follows a specific filing by an ETF provider named RAX Shares.
RAX Shares, okay. And the sources included a quote, didn't they? From an analyst suggesting RAX might be using regulatory workarounds.
That phrase stood out, didn't it? Regulatory workarounds.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of implies that even if the official rules on staking within ETFs aren't totally clear or finalized yet, providers are already looking for creative ways, these workarounds, to potentially get that yield generation into the ETF structure anyway.
Which would obviously make them a lot more attractive, potentially, than just holding Ether directly or a non-staking ETF.
Absolutely. It could significantly boost their appeal.
Okay, so let's piece this together from the sources. We've got this really noticeable sustained flow of cash into Ether ETFs recently.
Yep, the 15-day streak.
Especially when you contrast it with the choppiness seen in Bitcoin ETFs, according to the material. This is happening while Ether's price has been climbing.
Right, the 31% jump.
And then you have these bullish predictions floating around, gold fractals, technical analysis, pointing maybe towards new highs.
Towards $6 or surpassing the old peak, yeah.
And looking ahead, there's this potential evolution of the product itself, adding staking, possibly through these creative regulatory pathways. It really paints a picture of a market segment that's gaining serious traction and maybe about to change structurally.
It certainly suggests, based purely on the material you shared with us, that investor interest through these regulated channels is definitely growing. And the ways people can access that interest are getting more sophisticated, with things like staking being actively chased.
Okay, let's do a quick wrap-up then, based on what we've pulled from your sources. We talked about that impressive 15-day inflow streak for spot Ether ETFs, totaling $837.5 million. And how the sources stress that this single streak makes up roughly a quarter of all the inflows since launch back in July 2024.
Right, a significant concentration.
We saw how the material contrasts that with the recent volatility, even outflows for spot Bitcoin ETFs. And we set it against Ether's price backdrop around $2,490, up over 31% in the last month mentioned.
Exactly. And we synthesize those potential implications raised in the sources too, linking the inflows to those bullish price ideas, the gold fractal pointing towards $6,000.
Right.
And the technical analysis suggesting Ether might repeat patterns leading to a new all-time high, maybe beating that $4,878 peak from 2021.
And crucially, we discussed that point about potentially adding staking to these ETFs for better long-term performance.
Including that specific mention of the RAX shares filing and the whole regulatory workaround idea.
So, if you're watching this space, what does this all mean? Well, according to these sources, it means keeping an eye on these specific trends is key. It's not just the price action day to day.
No.
It's about how these regulated products, the ETFs, are drawing in capital and how their fundamental structure might be about to change with things like staking. The data points towards maybe a maturing market and definitely increasing institutional interest.
And that leaves us with a really important question kind of hanging there from the sources. If staking ETFs do become a reality in the U.S., maybe through these clever approaches mentioned, how could that fundamentally alter the whole investment case for Ether ETFs? Could it make them vastly more appealing, not just compared to traditional assets, but maybe even against other crypto investments that don't offer that staking yield within the ETF wrapper? It feels like a potential game changer that the material implicitly puts on the table for you to think about.